We've discussed the mistakes of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. Now it's time to talk about the good stuff. Let's do top 10 things the Nightmare franchise does right. Boy, you have to be really careful to get this damn thing off. What is up, guys? We're about to close off the big three. We've done the mistakes of all three. We've done what's right for Halloween and Friday. Now it's finally time to do Nightmare. And there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of great things to do with this franchise. So much so that after I put my list together, I posted on Killer Flicks. Post me some of your favorites, and I'll give a few shout outs. And that's what I'm gonna do. So throughout this, maybe especially near the end, I'll give some shout outs. But also, before I get into this, I did a horror pack giveaway recently. And I said I was gonna announce the winner on this. And I went through all the comments, and I let my wife actually pick the winner. What I did was I just scrolled back and forth, and I just had her stick her finger on there and find the winner. And sure enough, the winner is Angie Garcia. Congratulations, Angie. You have won a horror pack. So, I'll probably reply to her comment on there, but Angie, if you see this, leave me a comment down below letting me know that you got this, or just respond to the one that I'm gonna reply to on the other video. But anyway, let's jump right into the countdown. I'm gonna give you 2 honorable mentions because there are so many great things about this franchise that need mentioning. So anyway, first, honorable mention, the great characters, especially in those first few movies. There are so many great characters in this, and I think that's a big reason why this franchise works so well, aside from Freddy Krueger. If you give me really likable characters in a slasher, then that's a huge step up. And you know, all of Nancy Thompson's friends, Rod and Tina and Glenn, and then you know, even in the second movie with Jesse and his friends, and then you know, all the way up to the 4th movie, even I guess even 5th movie with Alice and Dan. But then you got Joey and Kincaid. So many great characters in this franchise, and to me that's a big thing. That's a big plus. Next honorable mention is definitely going to be Freddy's one-liners. I think it's a great thing that Freddy Krueger can talk, because the other 2 guys in the big 3, they're silent killers. They can't talk. So Freddy can do that, and I think Freddy does it probably the best out of all the verbal killers. You know, I think Chucky gets a lot of his influence probably from Freddy. But you know, just a couple that I love, like Welcome to Prime Time, Bitch, Where's the Fucking Bourbon, What a Rush. So many great lines, and it just really adds to every scene that Freddy's in. Now, of course, the lines do get out of hand, especially in the later movies. But we're here to talk about the good stuff, and when they're good, they're great. Number 10, I'm gonna give this one to John Saxon, because you know, John Saxon is kind of that Loomis type character. He's only in 2 movies, 1 and 3, but I think he really makes his mark in both those movies. I really liked him in this, and also if you remember, he was in Black Christmas. But John Saxon always makes his mark, and you know, he adds a little bit of gravitas to the role. And to me, aside from Donald Pleasance, he's probably the best in all of the slasher movies to play that, I guess, detective type of character. Number 9, gotta give that to Wes Craven. A special spot for Wes Craven, because if it wasn't for Wes, then we wouldn't have the character. Wes Craven based Freddy off of somebody that scared him when he was young. You know, he saw this guy that looked kind of like Freddy Krueger. You know, I think he said he saw him out his window or something like that, and he really scared him when he was a kid. And he got the name Krueger a little bit off of Krug from Last House on the Left. And then the idea of the movie he got from a real case, you know, where this kid was having nightmares and he didn't want to go to sleep because he felt like he was going to die. This happened in Asia, and the kid actually died. But Craven was able to bring that to the screen and arguably make the best movie of the franchise in the first movie. That's very debatable, but I mean, it's a great movie. It really is probably one of the greatest horror films ever made. Now, number 8, I definitely have to give it to Charles Bernstein, the composer who did the score. I think the Nightmare score is one of the most memorable scores out of all the slasher movies, and it's very unique. There's nothing like it. And you got a couple little cues there, especially like the 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. That's irresistible. But then just that, like that main theme, you know, it's like a little bit of like that haunted house feel to it, as well as like a little bit of a psychotic feel, I guess. And I guess this is my first Killer Flicks shout out because Holly Klein mentioned that in the comments. So she gets that one. Number 7, I'm gonna give this one to Alice. You know, Alice was a great character, and you know, she wasn't the main final girl throughout the whole series. She didn't even show up until part 4. But thank God she showed up, because you had a new actress show up in the role of Kristen Tuesday Night, who I felt didn't capture that role like Patricia Arquette did. But Lisa Wilcox, she owned that role of Alice, and I think there's a really good arc for Alice too, you know, because she does start out as kind of, you know, your traditional final girl, kind of like the Laurie Strode. But then by the time she's in part 5, hell, even the end of part 4, she's a badass, you know. She kicks ass, she stands up to Freddy, she does everything that you would want in a good final girl. You know, and it's not easy to follow Nancy Thompson, which is arguably one of the greatest final girls in slasher history. Now, number 6, I'm gonna give it to just the idea of nightmares and the boiler room and all that stuff. Specifically the boiler room, because that's kind of where the nightmare sequences usually start, especially in those earlier movies. That's kind of Freddy's playground, you know? Once you're in the boiler room, then you know you're completely up shit creek. There's something about the boiler room that's just really creepy. Gotta give mad props to the lighting department, because, you know, they're the ones that sell that scene. The boiler room does a lot on its own, but if you don't have it lit right, then it's not going to be as effective. And it's like a launching pad for whatever the nightmare is going to eventually become. And just the nightmare sequences in general. You know, I love the idea that the prey, they are in Freddy's hands. They're in Freddy's world. They have zero control whatsoever. You know, and that's a really scary environment to be in, when you have no control over your own well-being. And so in turn, you can't go to sleep. If you go to sleep, you're dead. And to me, that's genius. That is really a genius concept. Number 5, I'm gonna give this to Mark Patton. I think to come off the heels of part 1 and really change it up and try something different in part 2. And look, part 2 is a very controversial movie. It's split down the middle. There's people that don't like it at all. I happen to love it, and I think Mark Patton's a big reason for that. Mark Patton is a great actor. I'm gonna say it, and it's a shame that his career didn't launch after part 2, because he had the acting ability to do it. There's a lot of scenes in Nightmare 2 where, you know, he has to really emotionally react and break down and have, you know, these really sad and really scary moments. Especially the scene where he's like in Grady's room and he's completely losing his shit, and then Freddy like comes out of him. But wow, what an actor Mark Patton was, and I think he did an amazing job in part 2 actually. And really, he was one of the first final guys, I guess. Okay, number 4 is definitely gonna go to Nancy Thompson. You have to give an entire category to her. She's not only in 1, but she's also in 3, and they bring her back, I think, in the perfect way. It surprises me that more franchises don't do it this way. Hellraiser did, but I don't think that it was nearly as effective with Kirsty. But Nightmare really nails it. And Nancy Thompson is such an effective final girl because she really stands up to Freddy at the end. She's resourceful. She comes up with all these great booby traps, and she fights back. And she's so intelligent, actually. She's very smart. She figures out the way to beat Freddy. And it seems like even though Freddy's like 2 steps ahead of everybody, she's always in control throughout the movie. She's always the one that figures out a way to beat him at his own game, you know, to survive. And I love Heather Langenkamp's performance in the first and the third movie. Hell, one of my favorite moments in the third movie is when she first meets Freddy. His reaction to her, you know, that you, when he's like in the form of like, it looks like a penis. But I think that was like a grand entrance for her return to finally meeting Freddy again. And then her dying eventually in 3, that's the way you go out in style. You know, she died trying to save everybody in the movie. Which leads me to number 3, Nightmare 3, Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors to me is like the template for what you want to do in a sequel, and it's almost impossible to achieve what is achieved in Dream Warriors. There's so many elements that make Dream Warriors the perfect sequel. Freddy is at the top of his game. He starts venturing into the comedy zone, but it all works. His comedy completely lands, and he still manages to be scary as hell. There are some really terrifying moments involving Freddy in part 3, actually. It's a great story, you know. Where do you go from the first movie? Because they pretty much ignored 2 in part 3. But, you know, the first movie's so great, so where do you go from there? And they have just like this team. It's like the Avengers of a slasher movie. They all have their own powers, and so they're able to fight back against Freddy. And you'd think with, you know, that many kids fighting against Freddy that he would be outmatched, but no, they still maintain how dangerous Freddy is. He's able to take all of them out pretty easily, actually, at the beginning of the movie. But I mean, it's everything. You have the great final act with John Saxon coming back. You know, I talked about Nancy Thompson, her coming back. This is just such a big movie, and usually you don't have sequels to slashers that are on this level, that are on this scale. That this movie feels like a $40 million movie. It's just huge. But the big thing is it has so much payoff. And shout out to Monty on that one because he asked for a shout out. Number 2, the kills. I think the Nightmare franchise has some of the most innovative, most thought-provoking, and thinking outside the box types of kills because they're in this dream world. But the punchline, the payoff is usually really good and really terrifying, especially in those early movies. I mean, the sequences are amazing, and, you know, like Halloween and Friday, they can't compete in terms of scale. Take Glenn's death with this massive amount of blood, you know, coming out of the bed. I mean, who thinks up stuff like that? It's crazy. And probably my favorite kill of the whole franchise, Tina, where she's upside down. And, you know, the scene is terrifying. Still to this day, when you watch it, you know, she's covered in blood, and you only see her body on the ceiling just going back and forth. And I could literally just make, like, you know, a top 10 list of kills just in those first few movies. Have I done a top 10 list of kills for the Nightmare series? But bottom line, in terms of kills, I don't think you can compete with the Nightmare franchise because of the premise. You know, so the possibilities are endless. And of course, number 1, got to give it to Freddy Krueger himself, Robert Englund, really. You know, they were originally gonna make this kind of a silent killer, you know. I don't know if they were gonna have him talk at all, but luckily Robert Englund came into the role. If you remember, he doesn't talk that much in the first movie, but what he does do is pretty sinister. And then I think he's the scariest in the second movie, actually, if I'm being honest. But, you know, Robert Englund is an icon because of his work as Freddy Krueger. I've said often that I don't mind them having another guy take the role of Freddy Krueger, don the fedora, but I will never, ever take anything away from Robert Englund. I think he is unbeatable, unmatched in terms of capturing Freddy, especially when he's at his best. I mean, I'll even say it, Robert Englund to Freddy is almost like Stallone to Rocky. He's that important of an actor to play the character. And I'll even say that no other actor in the future, because eventually they'll probably make another Nightmare movie again, he might be good, but he won't touch Robert Englund. And you can tell he really loved the role, you know. He always had a blast, even in the bad movies, he had a blast playing the character. So you got to give him number 1, right? Now, a couple more from Killer Flicks that I had to shout out. And I will say, a lot of people said continuity, and that is a really great one too. It's one of the few franchises where they maintain the continuity all the way up to part 6. And no other franchise, I don't think, does that. Maybe Saw, but I think the characters are much more likable in Nightmare. But it's just always nice to see returning characters in the next movie. I always love that about the Nightmare franchise. Becky Sue Wade was one of them that said that, as well as Ethan Self. He said, I love that the Elm Street series carries over the characters into the next movies and brings them back. Nancy, Alice, Kristen, etc. And that's a really good point. And just a quick shout out to David Capps, because he said something really nice here. He said, I can't wait to watch it. I love all your videos. You are so real, genuine, honest, and all around good guy. Thanks, David. I appreciate that, man. Brian Kinzer, who has a channel called Slasher in Suits. Definitely check that out. He says he likes how Freddy seems to cover his tracks at least with the first couple of kills in a movie. Tina's death seemingly is a murder or a prison hanging or a sleepwalking incident. Very true, actually. That's a very good point. Kennedy Davies says, Tone. I've always loved just how creepy and eerie the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise is. You always feel like Freddy could be lurking in the shadows of reality and dreams. Very good point. Jason Mongold says, the songs Dream Warriors by Dokken, I love. I'm a big Dokken fan anyway, but Dream Warriors is it's probably one of the best Dokken songs, and it happens to be in Nightmare 3. Kyle Keene says, the one-liners, no matter how goofy, are a staple of the horror and slasher genre and were influential on big franchises like Child's Play and tons of DTV schlock fun. Very true, very true. I mentioned Holly Klein on the score earlier, and Monty Lamont Smith, I mentioned him earlier. He said he loves Dream Warriors 3. Everybody loves Dream Warriors. So, and last one I'll give is to one of my mods, Blake Garner. Blake, it's unique. I've always found Nightmare to be the most unique of the slasher bunch that I can think of. They strike a certain fantasy horror tone at times that is interesting. It's horror for sure, but it plays out like a different feel than your typical slasher. That's a very good point and very well said, Blake. Love that. All right, guys, I'm sure I missed some. Let me know in the comments some of your favorite things about the franchise. Looking forward to hearing them. Also, be sure to come over to Killer Flicks where we talk horror all day and every day, and on Fridays, we do Free For All Fridays. Follow me at Drumdums on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I can't talk. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a great day, and you are all my children now.